Welcome, everybody, to Web and Beyond Live. This is for October 19th, 2020. I'm Sidney-Smith, president of W3 Consulting. I'm also managing director of W3C Web Services, which provides affordable WordPress and other managed web hosting, domain name registration services for small business. And so this is our National Cybersecurity Awareness Month series that we're doing here. And to do that today, we have a jam-packed show. We have an action-packed show, and I'm pleased to be able to bring to the show for the first time, the first guest on Web and Beyond Live, attorney and cybersecurity expert Michael Gips. And so that you have all kind of a little bit of understanding of Michael, Michael Gips is, as I said, an attorney and cybersecurity expert. He brings 12 years of experience advising chief security officers in his role as the founder of the CSO or the CSO Roundtable and CSO Center for Leadership and Development. He helps bring businesses and organizations. He helps businesses and organizations manage their online and offline security practices. And so with that, I'm going to bring Michael onto the show. Hi, Michael. How's it going?
Good, Ray. Thank you. That was a great description. You encapsulated a whole career in about 2 sentences, so I appreciate that.
I try to be descriptive while still giving brevity, right? And so, welcome to Web and Beyond Live and to this session. What we're really trying to do for folks is to help business owners who are watching understand how to keep themselves and their staff safe online. And so, throughout our time together today, what I'd really like to do is to help them understand really the ongoing and current state of affairs related to how we keep people safe online in the context of having physical security and digital security kind of bleeding this cybersecurity threat on an ongoing basis. And so to start us off with, I wanted to talk a little bit about what are some of the kind of unique risks that you see small business owners facing with themselves, their families, because a lot of them are working from home, they're home-based businesses. Even if they're a retail shop, maybe they're a family business that has family members involved, employees and otherwise, when it comes to the digital and physical security environment.
Well, Ray, first of all, for the small businesses out there, keep going. It's a tough time for everybody. Small businesses, as you know, are the lifeblood of the United States and many other countries. I think something 80 or 90% of employees work for small businesses. And it's really the heart of innovation. I hope any of you who have needed Paycheck Protection Program loans have been able to get it. Please persevere. We need small businesses. I'm trying to do my part. Okay, well, after that public service announcement, I do have 5 key areas that I think cybersecurity that businesses should be aware of. And the backdrop here is not just the pandemic where everybody is working from home, but we're also in a time of civil strife. We have a very politicized electorate and a polarized electorate citizenry. We have racial justice protests. It seems like we have natural disasters. So we have a sort of a perfect storm of, and I don't want to beat this to death. We all know there's a meme, 2020. What else can 2020 bring? Well, 2020 can bring people exploiting all of these things. And what they do very well is they appeal to our emotions, especially through phishing attacks. And we all know what phishing attacks are. They've been around for a while. You get an email from a bank or a software company, and it says you need to click on this or do this. Your account is being suspended or something like that. And they try to get you to give you a sense of urgency and say you have to do something and click on something without really looking at it carefully, especially if you use that bank. It's, you're used to that logo. And they don't want you to look at it too carefully. The logo's a little off or the return email address isn't right. And now they're taking advantage of our emotions. So a lot of them have to do with COVID. A lot of them have to do with Black Lives Matter is doing this or that, or, both positive and negative, Antifa this, Antifa that. So you really have to step back, and I have some preventative measures or ways to tell that you're being phished. But really the most important thing is to be aware of it, sort of step back, take a breath, and show other people if you get a message like that and you're not really sure. My wife gets pinged by these sorts of things all the time, and she sends it to me and says, "Is this real?" And I tell her 99% of the time it's not going to be real, but every once in a while it is, and it's important business. It's important to your business, so you want to look at it carefully. The number two thing would be malware, and malware is downloading malware. That's very closely associated with phishing, because a lot of times phishing attacks want to get you to click on something that installs a piece of code in your computer that may take over your computer. It may infect files. It may make certain files inaccessible to you. Can take control of your browser. And you can even harness the power of your computer to do other things and send out attacks on other people's computers. Number three is ransomware, and you've no doubt heard about this. It's when a hacker gets into your system and encrypts your data, and he has the key or she has the key and you don't. And to release it, they demand some sort of payment. And the FBI and law enforcement always tells you, don't pay it, don't pay it. That just encourages them. But if you have no alternative, if you haven't backed up your files, especially you don't have on the cloud, because a lot of small business, 1-2 person businesses like, no one's going to attack me. That's not true. I've seen anywhere from 40 to 70% of ransomware attacks are against small businesses. So that's a wide range, but it's still a lot. So you definitely want to watch out for that. And one of the ways you can do that is, I'll talk about some of the tools, but you always want to have a cloud backup. Number 4 vulnerability is weak passwords. We all seen late night shows where people go up to people on the street and they say, "Okay, do you have a password?" It's like, "Yeah, I have a password." It's like, "Well, what is it?" So I can't tell you what my password is. It's like, "Well, can you tell me what it's like?" "Oh, it's the name of my cat." "Oh, what's the name of your cat?" "George." "Oh, so now I got your password." I mean, George 1, 2, 3, kids' names, favorite sports teams, not a good idea. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Yeah, I always find it to be really fascinating that today still the number 1 password in the world is password, and then it's like password 1, 2, 3, and then the passwords that are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Really, you need to have secure passwords. It's so important. So a great point there.
And what is extremely frustrating for me is that I have at least, and I'm no different than anyone else, 100 accounts that have passwords. I have bank accounts. I have social media accounts. I have email accounts. I have my gym account. I have this and that, and everybody has all this stuff. And I'll talk about password managers later and the importance of not repeating passwords, because I've been guilty of it. I might say Ray Sidney-Smith 1, and then for one account, Ray Sidney-Smith 2, and I'll just go back and forth. So if I ever forget it, okay, it's one of those 2. For the record, it's not Ray Sidney-Smith, and I hope yours isn't either.
If it is, I'm flattered.
It may be my next password. And finally, the 5th one, which is I think the most interesting one, is the insider threat. It's often insidious because the person is already a trusted insider. You've already given them the keys to the kingdom in a lot of cases, and they're working, from within. And for that, you need high staff security awareness. You have a system of checks, role-based access controls, anomaly detection. I'll talk to you a little about that. But if you don't think you can be attacked by an insider, I will tell you that I work with a business, I'm a partner in another business where we've got 15 staff members. And on 3 separate occasions, we've had insider attacks stealing our data. And these are people that we vetted and people that we trusted and people who got references from well-respected people. And they came in, they stole our data, and they left, and they sold it elsewhere. And that's very damaging to a small business. If data is your business, that could be crippling. So nobody is too small. Those are the top 5 that I see as sort of the biggest threats to small business.
Great. And so moving right along, I want to talk a little bit about what are some of the things that knowing those attacks, knowing those unique risks that small business owners face. We're small, businesses by virtue of the name, right? We may be small in size, but we are big in impact. And my curiosity is always around the idea of like, what can we do? What are the things that concretely we can do as business owners to prepare, like pre-attack, or in the case of unwitting you know what I mean? We're around these attacks happening. We see maybe the local pastry shop. They were attacked, a couple of weeks ago. That's not us. So we're unaware when in reality we were emailing back and forth with the owner of that pastry shop, and we've already been infiltrated in some way, shape, or form, whether that be by phishing or otherwise, some kind of email attack. We clicked on a link, you name it. And so we're unaware. What are those things we can do to kind of level our cybersecurity resilience, our cyber resilience up in those cases?
Sure, and you used a great word there, unwitting. I should have mentioned in my insider threat point that 2/3 of insider threat incidents are unwitting. So that's somebody who's manipulated, who is negligent, or just doesn't pay attention, and may get a call from someone and say, "Hey, forward me to this person," or the boss says you have to pay this invoice or whatever, and they don't have an evil heart. There's no mens rea, to use a legal term, but they just don't do their due diligence. They don't pay attention, and they just pass it on because they're trying to get their work done, and that's unwitting. But to get to the question, the most important aspect is a mindset. First of all, you're not too small to attack. If you have any kind of asset, someone there wants it, and it can't be too esoteric. You should also understand your operations, processes, and critical resources. Like, what resource, if you were denied, would stop your business? So it's just like, you want to be a risk manager. You have a small business. Everything you do is based on risk, whether to go for a certain market, to sell a certain product, offer a certain service, to appeal to a certain customer. You're doing, even if you don't know it, a cost-benefit analysis. You're doing a risk assessment. So you just want to be a little bit more conscious of that process and say, here are my critical operations processes, resources, and what do I need to protect? And then the next step is to do a risk assessment, and that will dictate what measures you would take. So you might identify your sensitive information, which could be customer lists, it could be sales strategies, it could be business plans, or it could be technical data. And then there's a whole bunch of things you can do in terms of software and hardware. You should definitely have antivirus software and keep it up to date. Anti-malware, a lot of these things come in packages, so they combine anti-malware and antivirus. You should have a firewall to keep hostile traffic out. A VPN, that's a secure channel to communicate and likely encrypted. You should have up-to-date patch management. So that means when you have software, the hackers are always trying to get into different pieces of software. They're always finding new ways in. And so you'll see, with Microsoft, you may have to update every once in a while. They're updating it to install new patches. So you might have all sorts of different software. You want to have a patch management plan. You also need to have documented policies and procedures. And I can't emphasize it enough that you should have thought through policies and procedures, have written policies and procedures, communicated policies and procedures to your staff, and enforced policies and procedures. And we can talk a little bit more about that. We talked a little bit about passwords. There are some good password management programs, so you don't have to remember 10 million passwords that have 100 numbers and letters and that you can't possibly remember. And some of the best ones are Keeper, LastPass, Dashlane, Bitwarden. Those are ones that I trust.
And as a point of
Yeah.
reference, just so people are aware, with say LastPass, I use LastPass in my own company, and that gives me the capability of not only managing both internally in my own personal life, but I can also then share passwords with other folks in my team. And LastPass has a really unique feature, which is that a lot of small business owners don't actually think about legacy planning and kind of what their exit strategy is, exit planning strategy. So if you are not thinking about that, LastPass does this function where it gives you the ability to turn ownership over to someone else in a number of cases, but particularly in, not to be morbid, but if you pass away, it has a function that says, if I pass away, you just set it up, then you give access to this person when and if I do pass. And so there's just an easy function to pass all of those passwords, because if you don't have, if I don't if I have my password to Facebook, and that manages my Facebook page for my business, it's locked if I'm the only admin and I pass away and you don't have access to it. So there are these other kinds of tangential risks that password managers really help solve in those cases. So
That's a great point, and bit of a tangent, but if you could figure out how social media owners or social media companies can take deceased people off their rolls, that would be significant, because usually there's a lot of people just no one knows how to deal with them. And you try to I happen to know quite a few people or some people who are still on LinkedIn, and I know they've passed away, and it's kind of odd if people are trying to connect with them, and it's almost otherworldly, but that's a different story. Passwords, again, you should be changing them every few months at a minimum. I'm a big fan of multi-factor authentication. A lot of you probably use that and don't know what it is, or just that's a fancy name for, if you type in your password, you'll get something that says, are you typing in this password? We're going to send you a message to your phone or to your email, and it's just a double check to make sure that someone hasn't stolen your password. I guess if they've stolen your phone too, and they've gotten into your phone, that they'd have both, but that's much less likely. And you can use different methods of multi-factor authentication. It could be if your facial image, could be your fingerprint, or you can even have three-factor authentication if you really want to tie it down really strongly. Endpoint security is just another way of saying lock down each device. It could be your laptop, your PC, a printer, because those are ways to get into the network as well. I'm a big fan of cloud backups, putting your stuff, not just backing it up and putting it off-site, but having a cloud storage company that does that for a living. And if they lose your stuff, they're losing a lot of people's stuff. That's their lifeblood and the reason being. So they are very good with your data. They make sure it's available whenever you need it, and they have very robust defenses. And just the last couple of things, encrypt your encrypt your files, hide your Wi-Fi name so people can't get that, and use a strong password on your Wi-Fi. With the policies, make sure you enforce them. And another thing to consider is cyber insurance. There's a lot of different policies out there. Some of them, you got to be careful what they cover and what they don't cover. So you have to read them. And I would even suggest sort of a consulting with someone who knows what they're talking about, a cyber lawyer or someone who does consulting in that field, to make sure it covers what you want to be covered.
Yeah, and I know a cybersecurity insurance person, so if anybody is curious, just reach out to me and I'll put you in touch with her, and that way you're speaking to someone who's knowledgeable.
Great. So yeah, those are my top 20 in that field. So
yeah, you bring up a really good point regarding Wi-Fi SSIDs. And so for those who are not aware, you have, when you have your Wi-Fi network both at home and at the office, it is actually pumping out a public name. It's the Wi-Fi that you find, you open up your phone, you are on your laptop, and you see that list of Wi-Fi IDs to connect to the internet. That is what Michael's talking about here. And you can turn that off. You can make it, in essence, silent, and only by looking for the name do you then find it. And so that's a really, really great tip there for being able to just make yourself less visible to the enemies that are out there.
And Ray, just to dovetail from that, or to springboard from that, if you go into a public place like an airport, you may be tempted to go on their Wi-Fi, and people sit in there and they'll create their own network that says airport Wi-Fi, or BWI Wi-Fi or JFK Wi-Fi. You can't trust those things. These are people who are trying to access your system. So in a lot of cases, and if they have an open network, especially, that means they're trying to lure you in. I mean, all airports do have Wi-Fi, and they're legitimate to a certain extent, but they're not protected, and there's just too much risk. Use your own hotspot or connect. A lot of them have wired. You can connect. You can plug into a wired connection. So do that. It's very. I've gone. I'm not perfect. I've connected to wireless network in airport in public places. Unfortunately, as far as I know, I haven't been exposed, but I try not to do that anymore. Those are desperate situations. Or use your data on your phone to communicate instead of a free Wi-Fi.
Yeah, this is where using VPN technology to be able to connect to. In last week's episode, I talked about the Firewall device that you can install in your home or office environment, and that actually gives you a free VPN, so you can actually tunnel through your own work or home internet access and then go out of there. So you're basically creating an encrypted channel between your device and your Firewall device, and then tunneling out. So it's going to be a little bit slower, there's no question, but you'll be secure and not, accessing things that you shouldn't be.
To all you are devotees of this show, this man knows what he's talking about.
I'm a little bit of a cybersecurity geek, so it's
well
what
done.
it is. So let's talk about the unfortunate case, which is the way most people come to me, right? Doing and being in the digital marketing and productivity technology space, people are constantly talking to me about different technologies that they're using, and ultimately that means that they are either aware of cybersecurity or they're not. And most people fall into the vast majority of they're not, right? Mm-hmm. They're unaware of it, and so they're impacted, and then they come to me and they're like, oh my gosh, Ray, I've just been impacted by X, right? We've clicked on an email and now we're getting the blue screen, or I've gotten this before, the screen, I get a message on screen and it's telling me that it has watched me, for some period of time, and it has recordings of me and recordings of my screen. And if I don't pay them, they're going to go ahead and release this information to the wider web. What do people do when they have to respond to, in essence, what is a cybercrime? And so what do they do in these cases? What should they jump into action and do those first few minutes, first few hours, first few days when they are impacted and probably quite frightened?
Yeah, well, what they usually do is panic. Not that they should do that. If you can avoid the situation, obviously, you that's why we're talking now. So you are doing preemptive things, precautionary things, because there's something like 60% of small businesses go belly up after a significant cyber attack, and it's because of not just lost revenue from downtime, but it's the cost of remediating, fixing everything, getting things back to what was, and maybe paying a ransom, and it's reputational damage. It's like, man, I stopped using a security intelligence service when they got hacked. They got hacked, and my emails got put on WikiLeaks. I didn't say anything. It was nothing fancy, nothing top secret. But I don't want my name on WikiLeaks. I stopped using them. That was a tremendous, reputational hit for them. And they were a small business, just a few people. But first thing you want to do is notify law enforcement, get them involved. You also may want to start segmenting. If you take down everything, if you lock up your system immediately, they may know that if you haven't gotten sort of an express warning or like, hey, we're in your system, and you may detect them. They may not know you and that you've detected them. So you don't want to necessarily take everything down. If they'll know and they'll start racing and trying to corrupt everything or steal everything they can, you might want to start segmenting things slowly, taking away your most important data, most important files, and getting it to where they can't reach. network segmentation. So once you've done that, then what they can access is a lot tamer. But you next want to figure out how the hacker got in, and you should probably hire you probably don't have the staff expertise on hand, so you probably want to hire an external consultant and then seal the path. And when you're sure you're safe, don't use the data that's current. Use the last iteration of your backed up data, because it could have been tainted, changed, contaminated, or whatever.
So I just want to underscore this. You're talking about this in a timeline where if you have effective backups, and I really believe in a threefold model of backups. You're talking about kind of an up on the cloud style backup system, and whether you have air-gapped systems or cold storage, and I'll explain those terms in a moment. But when we deal with those areas, the backup is so crucial here, right? Current backups, but even if the backup is for your most recent accounting software, that can be a week old, and you can catch up and fix those pieces. But you can't run your business if it's destroyed all of the data. So yes, there's always going to be an impact in terms of lost data, especially when you're working from backups. Usually, not always. So there's usually going to be some kind of data loss because you're going to go to the most recent backup. But you're way better off using the backup than data that has been infiltrated and potentially maligned. And so cold storage is when we take storage of a backup or of any file and we disconnect it from the devices, so it's not connected in any way, shape, or form to the internet or to another device. Air gapping is when we actually take the computer or the device, the computing device, and we disconnect that from the network or the internet as a whole. So that we talk about air gapping, is that it's literally physically next to maybe the device. Yeah. Right, exactly. But it's not connected to other connections that would allow people to communicate with it. So we can use these types of devices. You may have some air gap devices just by virtue of their age or the fact that they're not connected to the internet, right? I have some zip disk drives, I'm sure, that are air gapped because they're just sitting there as cold storage at the present moment. So, but continue on. I just want to make sure folks knew how important that is in terms of response is in that backup strategy. And so many people don't pay attention to backup.
Right. And obviously, the more you back up, the more frequently you back up, the better off you'll be. Now, maybe if you're a really small business, you can afford to back up every once a week or something, or 2 weeks. But for the most part, if you're backing up daily, don't back up once a month. There's too much. You'll miss it. It's that you're just courting disaster. And probably the most overlooked part of this is reaching out to customers who may be affected. And you think, if I tell the customer, they're going to think that, I don't have good security. I'm not taking care of them. I'm not trustworthy. I'd actually say it's the exact opposite. If you don't tell them and they find out, you've lost their trust. You've probably lost their business forever. Just like that company that, I didn't know that my information had gone onto WikiLeaks, so I'm not using them again.
Yeah, credibility is so important here, and there are also in every state in the union, at least, we have data breach notification laws now. So you need to pay attention to what your legal requirements are to make notification of those related to any personal identifiable information about your customers and clients. So even when you don't maybe want to, for best practice, you probably should for compliance issues.
And think of most of the major scandals out there. It always comes from the cover-up. It doesn't come from the actual event. I mean, the actual event could be bad, but it's 10 times worse when, you hear, oh, they knew about it for 6 months, or they didn't say anything, and my files were out there, my information was out there, and for a long time, and my credit card number was available to on the dark web or whatever, and no one told me. Then that's so much worse. So
And there are credible reasons for keeping that, right? Like, so if you contact the FBI and the FBI asks you to withhold that data from your customers because they're trying to find the cyber criminal, right, that's different. Okay, so that's very different.
Right.
But if this is just, a smash and grab style malware attack, and you've contacted authorities and they've closed the case on this, you should, at the minimum, follow the law in terms of data breach notification. But beyond that, I mean, just from a credibility perspective, you need to tell people. I noted a couple of years ago, we had a fire in our building, and it damaged our office. And that wasn't a data breach, but it was a data security issue. Like, we wanted to make sure that people understood what we were doing and why we were doing it. And so we went above and beyond. And I know the stuff, so I'm much more likely to do it. But and we're prepared for those things. But we wanted to give people assurance. Nobody's data was impacted. All we had complete 100% uptime throughout the whole ordeal. But that's how you want to do it, for whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's a fire in your building, whether it's a malware attack. You want to make sure that you are doing all the things right, so that this is just like, I always think about it from being an astronaut, and you're taking off in a spaceship, right? You have a checklist of things, and they are done in such a rudimentary position, right? It's just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You do this whenever this stuff happens, and then it becomes easy because you're just following very simple steps for being able to respond to any kind of disaster in the business. And of course, a cybersecurity or cyber criminal activity that happens in the business is, by its nature, a disaster, whether you like it or not, and we should treat it as such. So I love that. I love that notion. All right, so continuing on.
Yeah, so that's those are my top tips for responding.
Wonderful.
Yep.
I want to talk about some of the things that small business owners can do to protect themselves, both personally and professionally, in kind of staying secure. And we've talked a little bit about these, but maybe we can kind of dive into some of the tools that you use, in order to be able to do that, and really kind of kick the tires on those pieces. And then we can talk a little bit more about how business owners can do that, not just for themselves, but for their employees. So let's start off with small business owners themselves. What can they do to protect themselves, professionally, personally, and their family in this environment, in this basically high threat environment?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up family, because during days of COVID, everybody's working at home and the same devices are being shared. So your child may be doing schoolwork on the same computer that you do work on. Someone may be on social media. We're passing around the same phones, we're passing around the same tablets, laptops, sharing PCs. You've got kids gaming on the wired version, and you want to use the one that's wired into the, hardwired into the internet. And we're seeing a lot of issues arising from that. Stuff being shared or sent by mistake. I've seen cases with small businesses where someone did a screenshot and they put it on social media because they had something, I don't know, a video or something. And there was a sensitive piece of information, a document that was important to the parent of the house. And it got out on social media and somebody saw it, knew what it was, and they used it, and to the great detriment of the small business. So just simple things like that. Kids will, if they share your or even spouses, if they share the same computer, they'll send the wrong email, or there's a million and one things they can do that can compromise your information or compromise your security. So the first thing you want to do is, if possible, use different devices. Maybe even have certain different. In my house, we have different rooms, and my daughter who goes to school has an office. My wife has an office. I have an office. We don't use each other's devices because we don't want to. We don't want to mix. We don't want to mix anything up, mix and match, confuse things, or get anything out there that shouldn't be. So that's one basic thing to do. And a lot of times people don't have that luxury, of course, or they don't have multiple devices. What you could do is you can segregate files. You can segment your network. You can have certain people use one part of the network, certain people use other. And I would strongly recommend that if you own the computer and let your children use the device, you keep you work on the administrative settings, or have have administrative settings and then settings for each of the users. So you might have administrator, then you might have your own name, then you might have your children's names or whatever, and give them limited access. Don't let them download files from the internet, download software from the internet. Just basic things like that could corrupt your computer, your files. So we're seeing so much of that as everybody tries to do everything from work at home, and I can't emphasize that enough.
And so just to clarify here, what you're saying is that people should have different accounts with different levels of permissions on those accounts, and that the general use accounts should be non-administrators, so that people can not worry about kids or even yourself. Like I don't use administrator accounts for my everyday computer because I don't need it.
Right.
And so it's kind of the law of least privilege, right? So like what I need least to get done, I use, and that allows me that protected space to be able to make mistakes. It's kind of like a sandbox.
Sandbox,
and
yep.
It keeps me safe. And this is not on the browser level. So you'll see that many times browsers have the ability for you to have different profiles. I know that Google Chrome does, and I'm the Google Small Business Advisor for Productivity, and I'm one of the Google Chrome product experts, and so I do a lot in Chrome. But if you have those little, you see your little profile icon in the top space of Chrome, everybody who's logged into that account has access to that. So you're not any more or less privileged. Everybody has the same rights on that level. It's on the user profiles. You're logging in and out of those different profiles. And it's very effective at being able to protect from one user to the other and not having this kind of crossover event.
Yes, the excellent distinction between browser level and the user profile at the. This is when you log into your computer. So
exactly.
At the very basic level. There, some of the other things that I wanted to dig into is ransomware. I may be going off with a little bit of your question, but ransomware is spiking right now. It's probably, after phishing, it's becoming one of the most prevalent attack vectors or attack types.
And they're usually used in combination, right? Like they're basically using one to get the other. So
exactly. So if you get targeted, the average ransom demand for a small business is $116,000. That's a lot of money for anybody, if mom and pop business. Maybe if you're talking a business that's a small business, can technically be 500 people, right? Still, it's not a comfortable payment. No one wants to make it. And it's very controversial. The FBI's law enforcement tell you never to pay it. But from my experience, most companies pay it because they have no other choice. And, larger companies have paid multi-millions of dollars for many reasons. One is they want the data, but they also don't want the ignominy, the shame, the public humiliation, and the loss of credibility if it gets out. And that's what happened, say, with in the Sony hack years ago. They started leaking information about salaries of, I think, directors and actors, and actors started saying the women were paid less. Surprise, surprise, right? Mm-hmm. And that caused a firestorm. That caused terrible publicity. Probably worse than the fact that they had weak security, that they got hacked. So that's a follow-on issue, but it's incredibly important. I wouldn't want to go on record saying that you should pay it. And the party line is you shouldn't pay it, but a lot of companies have, because you can't be sure they're not going to, that you're not going to be sure they're going to release your data, right? A lot of
go ahead.
Please go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, so I'll play the devil's advocate here, which is to say that while one of the things that I continually hear is the argument among data security and cybersecurity experts about whether you pay the ransom or don't pay the ransom and so on and so forth. And the data is showing us that some unfortunate cyber criminals are taking the ransoms and then not doing a couple of things. One is they release the data anyway. Which is a whole other issue, or they don't have the encryption keys because they're the smash and grab types, right? So they're not sophisticated. We have basically ransomware as a service. There are companies that are out there. This is entrepreneurial at its very nature, right? But we have basically ransomware folks who go to these companies and they, in essence, find them clients, basically low-hanging fruit, businesses and computers that are out there not protected. They go ahead and do the ransomware for them, and then they get a cut of the business. So this is now so monetized because of the development of cryptocurrency as kind of a core function here. That is, digital currency today. We have people who are out there who are getting access to your devices, who are turning this into a business operation. So you have to be very mindful of the fact that ransomware may end up hurting you all three ways, right? Both as a credibility hit to your in a public relations perspective, your data getting corrupted and you not getting access to that data, and then you paying for it, and then of course never getting your data back. So
or having it released, right?
Yeah, all to say that what Michael's talking about is that it's muddy waters. Everybody has to navigate this through their own path, and you have to get legal counsel involved. You should get federal and state and local authorities involved to be able to make the right decisions here. It's a really unfortunate circumstance, and people like Michael know what they're doing. You should talk to those people and make sure that you make the right decisions as you're going down that chain of events. But certainly, if you're impacted, immediately get help, because if you haven't done all the things that Michael talked about earlier, right, in terms of hardening your security, you really need to make sure you do the right things on the other side of that.
Yeah, don't go this alone. This is make or break for your business in so many different ways. I like, ransomware as a service. That's really what it is.
Yeah,
and it's spun off into the people don't have keys. It's just smash and grab. That's a great point. Yeah. It's being routinized. It used to be the sort of special. You have to be sort of sophisticated. Now any script kiddie can do it. A script kiddie is just a term for a novice hacker who takes their tools off of the internet that are readily available. There won't be a test on that term at the end. What else can we go into?
Sure. So I want to. We're coming up on end of time, and I want to give some time. I'm watching over here with questions from folks, and so I wanted to just ask one of my final questions for you before we go into the other questions, which is really, what do you do for employees then? How do you help employees stay productive and secure? And I believe the two of them are tightly bound together. What are some practices that small business owners can do? Because what I've heard on the street, like out there in the in the wild, is that business owners want to keep their employees productive, but by enforcing all of these cybersecurity policies on top of them, it's created a sense of fear that keeps them from actually being productive, right? And so what are some of the things that business owners can do to kind of tightrope walk those functions of being safe while still being secure?
Right. So first of all, I like to see, policies and procedures are essential. Policies and procedures, I see them as like, say you have a lifestyle program. I'm going to eat well. I'm going to eat vegetables and fruit and blah, blah, blah. I'm going to drink 8 glasses of water a day. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to have, see my family and friends and do these things for my mental health. Those are policies and procedures. Actually following through with them is the, is not the enforcement, but the sort of the activation of that. I have to actually do those things. I have to work out. I have to can't eat, brownies all day. I have to get 8 hours of sleep, not 4 hours of sleep. And you want to encourage, you don't want this to be punitive. So doing the same thing, cyber hygiene shouldn't be punitive. It actually should be fun. And there are ways you can do it. You can give people rewards. You can do fake phishing attacks. Now, first of all, you want to do training so you know what phishing looks like, for your employees know what phishing looks like. You want to give them the tools that could, that can prevent this sort of thing, but make it more of like a game and make it something that they can win. Give them a $20 gift card if they identify a phishing attack or a fake phishing attack. That's nothing compared to what you could lose in the event of a real attack. When you do training, make it continuous and make it fun, and make it personal. I ran security for a small company recently, and we would do training where we did a different game show every time. So one day we did Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and we'd go through which of these is most likely to be to have the elements of a phishing attack, which of these is a malware, and then you get up to the harder and harder questions, and we had asked the audience, we had 50-50, whatever the other lifeline was, and everybody got into it, and we had real prizes as you went along, and everybody was engaged. Oh, this is when we could still meet in person, but you can do this virtually as well on a Zoom call. We've had the same thing where we've done Jeopardy, we've done sort of other exercises. So to get people to retain information, you have to keep refreshing it, and you have to make it something that you have to engage them. So there's the common expression, you tell them, they forget, you show them, whatever. It's like, I forget what it is, but you have to engage them, they learn, and they apply it, and use the carrot and not the stick. And don't shame somebody. Anybody can make these mistakes. We've probably all made mistakes where we've clicked on the wrong thing. People want to learn. They want to be humiliated. They want to be encouraged. And don't make it a chore. Make it part of, it's as important as whatever you do during the workday, for your job. It shouldn't be an obstacle. It shouldn't be a burden. It shouldn't be sort of, jumping through hoops to get to your work. It should just be, a natural part of your everyday workday.
Yeah, I'll give a good example, which is that in my own business, I'm sorry, this isn't a past business, but it still applies to this one as well. But in my old business, I was in real estate and in a title agency, and my business partner had her law practice attached to our title agency. And so we would send our staff to a wide variety of learning experiences, whether they be conferences and workshops and seminars and other things, and actually a wide variety of disciplines, right? Because we had the insurance business and the real estate world, but we also had paralegals and other folks doing other things and attorneys doing other things, and then marketing and technology and whatever. And we would actually bake in little cybersecurity components into all of these pieces. So every time someone came back from an event, they would have to not only explain what they learned, but how we did it securely in our environment, right? That was the challenge. And, people are actually quite savvy once they're given the kind of the perspective of thinking about it that way, right? Like, yeah, okay, so we want to implement this marketing tool. Well, how secure is it? How secure is their database? How secure is it for our clients to interface with that? And how is it going to be secure on our devices? And once people start thinking about it from that security perspective, like how could someone, okay, well, we want to buy new equipment. Can someone just like run into the office and grab it and run out? And what data is it going to have, right? Those are the kinds of things that once you make it a part of the culture, people start thinking about it on every level. And it actually helps them to not only self-police, but feel empowered to catch crimes as they're happening, because I can't kind of impress upon people enough. These are cyber crimes that are happening. When these malware actors are coming after your business, they are committing crimes, and this is criminal activity. And you, just like any good citizen, should be vigilant to when crime is happening. Just because you can see someone smash a windshield or a side mirror, a side window in a car and grab a CD player out of it, This is dating me back to the 80s. I grew up in Brooklyn. That's what they
Right.
did.
No radio in car, right? The little signs, right?
Like that. You would call the police if you saw that kind of thing happen. These are the same kinds of things you need to be vigilant and stay ahead of those kinds of things. So very much appreciate your comments there, Michael, on that.
Yeah, and not only are they the same, they're probably much more destructive, much more valuable. You steal a radio, what is that, $100 and a few $100 in repairs. You steal data, that's priceless. And, the remediation of your system, make sure no one can get into it, and protecting your reputation afterwards. That's, the difference is logarithmic in effect monetarily and in reputation and other factors. That was a brilliant example you gave. And the beauty of it is that everyone says this in security, that security is everyone's business. But in small business, it really is, because there's often no security person. You'll have a person, the IT guy or gal, you might have a couple of those. Yeah, they do security, but that's, big businesses have whole security departments, have whole IT security departments, physical security departments. And the IT people don't do security because they say IT security, IT is a conflict of interest because they have competing objectives. So you're giving an IT person a ton of responsibility. If they're solely responsible for security, they can't possibly do it alone. So really, in a small business, everyone has to be empowered to think about security and to act on it. And it starts with education.
Fantastic. I want to ask a couple of questions that are coming in before we close out.
Sure.
One question coming in that I've seen several folks ask is about some tools. They're asking about some of the tools that you use and kind of recommend for them to be able to stay on top of things like phishing attacks and other things that you noticed here. What are some of the tools that you use?
I personally use Avast business antivirus, and it contains all these tools contain a lot of things. So it's not just antivirus. It has a firewall. It has a web shield. It has email shield, anti-spam. It looks for attacks on your Wi-Fi network, and it's cheap. It's only $40 per device, I believe. But there's a lot of other good ones. You could use Malwarebytes, and a lot of the basic services are free. They'll keep pestering you to buy it, and it's really worth it for how little it costs. I mean, it might be $50 a device generally a year, or $75, but Malwarebytes makes a good one for anti-malware. Kaspersky Small Business is good. Norton makes Norton 360. Bitdefender is another good one. And McAfee, I like McAfee Total Protection also. It includes antivirus, it includes password manager features, and it uses machine learning, I believe, to identify code that might be trying to cause problems on your computer. So it sort of detects anomalies on your network, and it says, oh, this is an unusual activity, and you might want to look into it. So there's a lot of very sophisticated tools, and they're all good. So I recommend highly getting one of them. Get at least one of them. They're all, the ones I mentioned are all good. There are quite a few others as well, but I wouldn't run any business without that basic software.
So I'm gonna ask one more question, and then we're gonna have to close out. So I apologize to everybody who asked all these great questions in the chat, but we are running out of time. So you talked a little bit about some of the policies that folks should have, and there have been several questions here about what are some of those policies? What are the policies that you recommend that a small business owner has, kind of top line? What are the maybe top 2 to 3 cybersecurity policies that should be in place?
Sure. So I would say probably the 1 and 2 are access control and bring your own device. Access control allows people access to the network based on their roles and responsibilities. So if you have a finance person, obviously you want to give them access to, the financial software, maybe not to other pieces of software that they're not, like their learning management system or something that they don't really need to get into, or they're not trained to use. So sort of like a permissioned level of access, or a need to know or need to have information. So that's critical. Now, in the financial, I use that as an example. You never want one person to have access to that, because for the shenanigans that it can cause, misappropriation or setting up fake accounts or false vendors. So you always want to have what's called at least a two-man rule, people reviewing each other whenever there's finances involved, so they double check, or even more than that, so they can't be working in cahoots. So role-based access control. The second one is bring your own device policies, because companies are especially small companies, are not handing out phones, distributing smartphones, and everyone's got different software on their phones. Everyone's using a network. They've got different apps, and a policy should clarify what are permissible uses of the phone, what should be accessed, how do it interfaces with the corporate network, even things like what it's going to be paid for by the company. So bring your own device, access control, two of the biggest ones. And a lot of the other policies have to do with updating software. They might also have physical access control implications, like talking about if you have a server, physical access control of servers. So you have to have certain kind of locks on the door, or there are a million different kind of policies, and I can make available a sample policy for both cyber and the physical aspects of cybersecurity. If your listeners and viewers want to review that.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I always say to folks, bake it in. So like there are policies in-house that we have in both our employee manual as well as in our normal owners, the handbook for the company. And we have little cybersecurity snippets all throughout there. There are points where it'll say, if you are creating your G Suite account and now Google Workspace, these are things that you have to make sure. These are the roles you're allowed if you're in these particular categories. And so it's kind of baked into every little bit of it. We just make sure that at every chance we have, the policy matches up with the actual operations manuals as well. And it's just really nice for us to be able to see those pieces. Now it creates a little bit of administration because you got to update them in different places and keep it up to date. But at the end of the day, this is your business. If you're trying to make sure that you're staying in business, don't get hit with these cybersecurity incidents that are going to cause you to end up out of business because of it. And so, yeah. Anything else you wanted to share, Michael?
Yeah, the final thought is, I guess, don't think of it as a pain, as just yet another thing to do, because we've all been in that mindset. When early on in my career, I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this. This is just, taking away time from, the productive time, but everything's part and parcel of the same thing now. It's security is so important. It should be, ingrained in your business. It should be, it should be sewn into the fabric of your business. So it's not even a cost of doing business. It's an advantage of doing business. It's peace of mind for your employees. It's letting them know that you're taking care of them. It's projecting a good reputation to the public, and it's being a good corporate citizen. So if you think of it that way, and adding value rather than being sort of a drag and something that just costs you time and money, it's a better perspective.
Yeah, so we can make it death, taxes, and cybersecurity.
Well, yeah, I don't know about that.
All right.
Maybe flip it around. But
there you go. Yeah. Hopefully, cybersecurity before, certainly before death, maybe not before taxes. But this has been a real pleasure, Michael. Thank you for joining me here on Web and Beyond Live. And so for those folks who would like to keep up to date with your work or connect with you, how can they do so?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. If you can shoot up my, you got it right there. That's my preferred way. You can, I have a podcast as well that I do with Inside Access Control. They host it, and check in if you want to. If you think you got what it takes to be a guest, I'd love to have you. We talk about security issues as it interfaces other areas like law, media, leadership, technology like AI, or just tune in. And you can also check out my website. It's gipsinsights.com. I believe you showed a page earlier on, so it shows you what I do. But feel free to get in touch with me. I'd love to chat with you and see what your needs are, or just if you're interested in this industry, help you, help you get your feet wet or move you along.
Fantastic. I'm playing around with all these various pieces to show on screen, but for those of you who are listening to the podcast afterward, it is the Insider Control Access. Was that right? Inside Control, Inside Access Control.
Inside
Sorry.
Access Control. Yeah.
Inside Access Control. And
yeah, my particular podcast is called Global Insights in Professional Security, which is easy because it's GIPS, the acronym, which is my last name. So Global Insights in Professional Security, which is also the name of my company and my website. So I try to keep it simple. Yep.
Yes. And if you want to find Michael on LinkedIn, it's linkedin.com/IN/Michael Gips, GIPS. So if you're listening, you can go ahead and find him there. Yeah, there you go. And so with that, thank you, Michael, for joining me here on the show.
It's been a real pleasure, Ray, and great dialogue. You know your stuff. I'm very impressed.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
You added a lot.
I appreciate that. All right, so that was Michael Gips from Gips Insights, and just a couple of closing announcements before we do close out. So I just have a few things here that I wanted to make note of. Next week, we are going to close out our National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, which is brought to you by the National Cybersecurity Alliance and CISA, which is a cybersecurity infrastructure and security agency in the federal government. So they host this month every October to keep up our cybersecurity awareness. But next week, I have the pleasure of kind of talking about the flip side of this. I think Michael talked a little bit about this, which was kind of like, what are the business advantages of being cyber resilient? And so I'm going to have Vince Chrysler, who's the CEO of Dark Cubed. He'll be joining me here next week to talk all about that stuff. So please join me there. If you have any questions or anything else like that, I think I've noted this in the past, but it's good to just remind everybody. I run a small, digital community for small business owners all around digital marketing and productivity and other fun things. You can join us by going to www.webandbeyond.community. The .com is .community, and you can go ahead and join. And you have to fill out a form. It'll say, get approved. I'll approve you. You'll join us, and you can always ask questions about digital marketing, any of the other things. We'll be back in November to our normal regular programming about digital marketing. I know that we've been focusing on cybersecurity this month on those issues, but it's really important that I think you all get a handle on all of this. So I'm really appreciative of you joining us and sticking around. And so with that, I'm going to say that we've come to the end of our time together this week. If you've enjoyed the live stream, feel free to click the thumbs up, and that helps us to find new small business friends. And so thank you for doing that. If you have a question or a comment, feel free to tweet at me at W3 Consulting, W3 Consulting on Twitter. I'm always on Twitter, so you can always message me there. And then you can join us every Monday, typically at 11 a.m. Eastern. Unless otherwise noted on our social channels, we do come to you live every 11 a.m. Eastern on Mondays. Thank you so much for spending this Web and Beyond live with me, this special National Cybersecurity Awareness Month episode. I'm Ray Sidney-Smith on behalf of W3 Consulting and our subsidiary W3C Web Services. Here's to a great week ahead, marketing and managing on the Web and Beyond. Take care, everybody.